Charlie Jones.
And I'm Pat Summerall. And Charlie, as you know, this was the first week in which all teams from both leagues were in action.
The action came in all sizes and shape, as you well know, Pat. And some of the teams ran true to form as far as their strengths and weaknesses were concerned. But I think you would agree that this week there were more than the usual number of upsets.
I think any time you go into the first week of the season, you try to expect the unexpected. But in the NFL this week, the surprises came fast and furious, especially in New York, where the Giants met last year's Central Division champion Minnesota Vikings.
It seems that the city of New York had a monopoly on upsets. The other team, the New York Jets, were not as fortunate as the Giants. They traveled to Denver. They played in the Mile High Stadium. They received a welcome ill-befitting of their position as last year's Super Bowl champions.
Welcome to This Week in Pro Football, the podcast.
Why are we doing this?
That's a good question. I am not Pat Summerall, and you are not Charlie Jones. I am Ed Carter.
And I'm James Jones.
We were both big NFL fans growing up, and we were the perfect age for this show. This is the first episode, and we're going to start in 1969, when it was the first show that had featured both the NFL and the AFL. Of course, it was only 1 year because it was 1969, and then the merged league starting in 1970. This was way before ESPN and SportsCenter and the internet, before NFL Ticket, and the only highlights you could really see
was this show,
or, NFL Game of the Week.
If you weren't watching the news clips at the time, and you were probably going to miss it if you didn't watch this show. And it ran a couple of times a week, maybe. Sometimes the shows might be at 3 o'clock in the morning. You got nurses that became fans of the show because this was something to watch while they were on duty.
It was at 4 o'clock on Saturday afternoon, just like it is right now. We're recording this podcast. That's when I used to watch it.
Right. It was on Saturday in the early 70s when they were starting out. They were all over the place. But yeah, 4 o'clock. I remember we would watch the show, and if you didn't watch this show, and if it wasn't on the Howard Cosell Monday night highlights, then you probably didn't see any of it.
And the other thing is that everybody can, you can watch any game now probably if you have NFL Ticket, that kind of thing. But in those days, you would just see probably two games. One game would be your home team game, and then you would see another game. And so you'd only, you don't get to see all these other games. You don't get to see all these other teams necessarily. And so really the only way you're going to see these players in action, unless you happen to, you might go the whole season without seeing a particular team. And so the only way you would see it is watching these shows. So.
You might get lucky if you were watching a live broadcast at the time. They might cut in and show you a clip from another game, but it's usually pretty limited. Maybe it was just regional. You would get another piece of the action maybe at halftime. But, by the time the game was over, usually you just had to wait for the news to maybe show you a clip, and you had to get the right channel, too, because not everybody's highlight would be broadcast.
And these shows were not just the highlights. You had the hosts like this week, this year with Pat Summerall and Charlie Jones, and they had these very, very well scripted, this is the Sables, this is Ed Sable and his team of NFL Films. And they write these very dramatic scripts. Each game is like a little narrative that they have. And then, of course, the big thing for us and for most people is the music. People know about Sam Spence as sort of the most famous composer of the music that are these shows.
I started hearing his music when I was 8 years old. I think before we moved to Chatsworth, I remember watching programs, and some of the songs that would sound kind of eerie or scary, and then the slow motion, I was just drawn into it. And when we got to Chatsworth, I became a 49er fan because Dad was cussing at the TV when he was watching his team play. So that I had to watch and sit down with him. And 69 was the year. I think that was the year they had a game at Kezar. 49ers were winning, I think, by 2 scores. They lost the game. And I think I remember Dad cussing a lot, and I was kind of laughing because it didn't bother me as much now. back 30 years later, we're both cussing at the TV, so that was the only difference.
And the music that is on there is this blend of kind of movie soundtrack music and rock of sort of the period, big band, jazz, country. There's all kinds of styles sort of thrown in together, and it's sort of unique. And it's been later used on TV shows and commercials, so some people, it's somewhat familiar. Of the big country, there's a ripoff of different, famous movie themes. So, they're not entirely original, but we still love them. And the other thing is, after these shows, later in the 80s and 90s, you couldn't see them. I mean, there were bootleg copies going around. You could buy some of the shows for whatever, $50, $100 a piece from the NFL. They weren't really selling them. You had just, they were just way too expensive.
You're just talking about the highlights?
Yeah, these shows. We couldn't see them.
Shows,
and it was
right.
like
they were like communists. They wouldn't want to deal with the public. They had to keep it private. And then I think there was a time when we started hearing NFL music on the radio and commercials, and I think it was because they were only doing business that way. So pure listeners were probably not going to be cut a deal like we were when I bought those 4 albums in '84.
Yeah,
$10 a piece. I mean, those days were over by the mid '90s.
They were on some highlights of the music or some excerpts of the music pieces were on vinyl. There was 4 albums that I bought. I don't know, probably around the mid '70s maybe. But that was it, and you certainly couldn't see the shows. And so by late '90s, I think that's when you and I met, and we were like desperately trying to get these shows, trying to find them and trying to see them, and it was impossible.
And the music too. I mean, we were chasing the music, and we were just hitting stone walls all the time. We were trying to get the high sign from people over, and then whatever that meant, and nothing came of it. I did get to talk to I think his name was Phil Spieler.
Yeah.
Somebody gave me his phone number. I just called him up, and he didn't really have any control over how the music got distributed. And then there was what was his name, Dan Hedden.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dan.
He was
Hedden
later. Yeah.
He was later. Pretty good musician on his own right, though, I would have to say.
So at a certain point, these started to show up in bootlegs on eBay. Well, first on VHS, they were just kind of floating around in the sort of, I guess you'd call it gray black market. And then I bought a whole bunch of them on eBay from some guy. There were several collectors who had them. I don't know. They were bootlegged from whatever source. So at some point, I bought all of them that were available. And then they started just showing up on YouTube. And then this guy, Dave Volsky, did a huge amount of research. He tried to find out, identify every single song that was in every single show, upload all the stuff. And then maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, the NFL just didn't like it anymore, and they just shut down his YouTube channel. So that was too bad. But
guy did some great work. I mean, he put together things that nobody else could do, just mixing sound and picture. He reconstructed the 49er championship game with the Cowboys in 1970. He mixed in NFL films with radio calls and even TV broadcasts. It's a shame that some of those old games just kind of slipped away, down in between the cracks. But the 49er Minnesota 1970 game probably could have been recorded, but somebody decided to, I think, audio tape something else for that afternoon. So he actually had the intro. I think we see Ray Scott in a color picture. It looks great. I mean, they could have had it just like that color picture with the. And I think the story was, I don't know, something Dave Volsky wrote up or somebody else that likes Dave Volsky, that the guy decided to do another game at the time that they were on, which I think was a 10 a.m. game here.
But there's a guy now out, I think his Godzilla is part of his name on YouTube, who has just kind of said F you to the NFL or to YouTube and just said, I'm repost. He probably downloaded all the Dave Volsky stuff, and he's uploading it again a little bit at a time. And he just said,
keep making
this will never die. Dave Volsky's work will live on. So I think people post a lot of this stuff on there,
It's good to know there's
and
plenty of
and it
Dave Volskys out there.
gets taken down, but it gets put right back up. So that's the thing. Hopefully you could watch this. We know that this episode, as we're recording this, is on YouTube. There's the kind of the special feature that's not really the games is not in this version, which is not the end of the world, but hopefully you'll be able to watch it, and then you could listen to this podcast, or you could probably just listen to this podcast and not even really watch the show if you don't want to. But so that's part of the reason was now these things are readily available to be seen, so you can watch the thing and then listen to us talk about
No way we could have said things like that in 2002.
That's right. Well, I didn't have podcasts then either. And you might have found this because you follow my Facebook page, which is another kind of a precursor to this. I just was taking still images from the shows and putting them on this Facebook page that I created, which people seem to like it. I mean, it's pretty popular, at least in my world. It's fairly popular. So hopefully this will be like the audio version of that. I mean, I think we could go on and just start talking about the games if you want to.
We can start with the first game that they show on the program, which is the Giants and the Vikings. This was a game where you have the Giants, which are going in there as heavily underdog, but they're at home. The Vikings come out to a big lead, and you think that's what's going to happen is the Vikings are just going to prevail. And from the opening kickoff, it just seemed that way, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, as we noted in this beginning, is the Vikings were the Central Division champs before this, and they were heavily favored, even though it was in Yankee Stadium. And they went out to a big lead, and then the Giants just slowly.
A couple of things I noticed. Fred Cox hits a field goal with the laces in. There's a nice shot of him kicking the ball, and you definitely see the laces. It's the first points of their season.
One thing I noticed is that Gary Cuozzo has plays for the Vikings, and that's the last time he's going to start for the rest of the year.
Yeah, Joe Kapp was injured?
He was maybe just second on the depth chart, The other thing, I was following the Vikings this season. In those days, I was a Viking fan, or I started actually sort of later in the season. But they lose this game in the last minute to the Giants. They rip off 12 wins in a row, and then since they had wrapped up everything, home field advantage in the playoffs and everything, they had nothing to play for in the last game of the season against the Falcons. It was a mud bowl. They probably didn't even play their starters, and they lost 10-3, something like that. However, had they pulled out this victory, then they would have been 13-0, and maybe they would have tried to win that final game, and they probably could have because the Falcons weren't that good, and they could have gone 14-0 this season, definitely, because they were definitely
if they had won that first game, if the guy just didn't come up with that catch. With less than 2 minutes left, it was 3rd and 17.
That's right.
And who else but a guy by the name of Butch Wilson catches the ball on the deflection for a 33-yard gain on 3rd and 17. Now it's it's within distance, and then there it is. It's rookie Don Herman again.
From some little tiny college, I forget, was Augustana College or Saint something, I can't remember.
The Augustinians, eh?
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's also Alex Webster's first game as head coach. They make a big, they talk about this later in the program because Alex Webster, I think, was Pat's roommate when they were with the Giants. So
that's right. He was a big, likable guy, and for a redhead rookie head coach, Alex Webster, as he's carried off the field at the end of this game, his first pro game, and though he would go on to have a coaching record of 29 wins and 40 losses, he had about a 5-year career in the NFL.
And this is the first time the Giants beat the Vikings ever. So I don't know if they played every year, but the Vikings were
Right.
starting in 1960, they were an expansion team. So it's interesting. This is the first time the Giants beat them. So that's about all I have to say for that game.
All right, Pat, what's next? It looks like the Broncos and the Jets,
Yes.
and this is in Mile High Stadium.
Yep.
And, well, just to get one thing out of the way right away, why did Weeb Eubank use Babe Pirelli for a crucial two-pointer at the end of the game? I mean, you got Namath in there. You know you're going for 2 points. Where's the deception putting a lousy quarterback, in for a crucial two-pointer, which they had in the AFL in those days?
This is a common thing that coaches do. They have the best players on the field for, the game tying this or that, and then they put in some, third stringer or somebody to run a wildcat to try and score the two-pointer. And it's like, have your best people in there. I guess they figured like, oh, they're all used to playing Namath the whole game, so they haven't seen Pirelli, so they won't know what he's going to do. I don't know.
They rushed Pirelli, threw the ball away.
He threw it, and it was a very low ball. Yes.
Yeah, it was like, he throwing it to no one.
And as mentioned in the intro, Jets are coming off their miracle Super Bowl victory, so they were favored to win, I'm sure, by probably at least 10 points.
I think maybe the altitude might have something to do with it. Maybe they don't go there very often. This is their first game, and they're in a Mile High city, and we have to remember what name. Remember the guy from UCLA? What's his name?
Mike Hafner.
Mike Hafner. Yes, remember that name. He does make a hell of a catch, though.
Yes.
The guy lays out, just complete horizontal, makes the catch, doesn't trap it against his body like other players get away with.
Yeah,
it's
a
hell of a catch.
Charlie Jones, makes the thing like, oh, remember that name, like he's going to be this pro.
Did they remember that name the next year?
No, he had 2 years with the Broncos, one with the Bengals. Although he still does hold the Broncos rookie record for yards per reception in a game, 30.4.
Not
so he
bad.
And he was later a sideline reporter with ABC, and his claim to fame was his mic caught UCLA coach Terry Donahue, who happened to be his college roommate, swearing in the 1978 Fiesta Bowl. So that's pretty bad.
And this is, of course, 1969, and you've got an AFL game going on, and it's just not unusual to find cheerleaders doing cartwheels in the end zone almost during a play. I mean, they drop their pom-poms sometimes in the end zone. This is just, you got kids. I think Super Bowl III, isn't there a kid that runs after the extra point because it kind of like bounces back onto the field? You see like a couple of kids chasing the ball after the extra point has been kicked.
Yeah, that's just a different world. The other thing is they don't show Steve O'Neill's 98-yard punt. They mention it. They show him doing another punt, and it's like, wait a minute, where's the 98-yard kick?
Just weren't
still a record,
Not pushing the film, boy. That's a real bummer. But you wonder. So it went from the 1 to the 1.
Exactly.
Right.
So he's kicking from the end zone. I mean, he's kicking from the end zone.
Short snap, right? I mean, it's only going to be about 9 yards, right?
And it has to probably go over the returner's head and bounce whatever.
And it has to be
40
windy.
yards.
I'm thinking it's windy. He kicked it right in the middle, and it just started picking up end over end. And I still don't. He must have still kicked it, like maybe 70 yards in the air. Because it's got to roll. It can only roll so much.
Yes.
It's not on artificial turf. It's going to be on a crown-shaped field. It's probably going to start dying and going lateral. How does he?
It's in Denver, so there's probably that helps it a little bit. So.
Oh, and then there's this touchdown catch by Al Denson. That makes it 21-13 in the fourth quarter. Denson spikes the ball. It short hops the ref on his leg, but he doesn't seem to mind, let alone throwing a flag for it. I've seen that before. Like maybe, what was it, back in 1999, I saw somebody spike the ball. It short hopped the ref in the leg, and he threw a flag.
What?
Yeah, that was in '99. I remember watching that. And then here's this, the guy spikes it. The ref just kind of backs up. It it short hops his ankle or whatever, and he thinks nothing of it.
There's a sign in the stands from the Broncos fans that's a sign of the times. It says, "Blow our minds."
Blow our minds, yeah.
Let's move on to Rams at the Colts Memorial Stadium.
Unitas gets the start.
Yes, after Earl Morrow led them to the Super Bowl the previous year. The thing I noticed is that there's no space at all behind the end zone, the back of the end zone.
Oh, yeah.
And one side. The
Baltimore
stands are about, I'm not making this up, they're about a foot away from the end of it. So it's like you score a touchdown and you're doing an automatic Lambeau leap.
Yeah, a guy in the front row could break up a pass. Yeah, I saw that. I think that happened in Milwaukee too. There was one spot, but this thing in Baltimore is. I think there's another stadium too later, where they put up like what looked like a blanket or a pad because there was a chain link fence running around the corner of the end zone that's like a foot away again within arm's reach. And this will slow them down. We'll put a little blanket over it.
And the other thing was in those days also, well, probably is a little bit this way also today, is it was crowded with photographers and just whatever hangers on and maybe people from the stands hanging out of the back of the end zone. So you catch something and you're gonna run right into people.
Unbelievable.
And like a lot of the stadiums in those days, it was multi-use. So they're playing on, the baseball infield is there at the same time, probably for the Orioles,
Oh, that field was just nothing but dirt in a World Series, and, the rest of the season was just a dry, grassless field in Baltimore.
And that was a very windy stadium, too, so there's always, swirling dust.
A dust bowl.
Yes.
Yeah, I think, what was it, Bill Curry would say that, the dirt would just get in your teeth and your jock strap and just everywhere. It's just horrible. Oh, and that's right. Lou Michaels kicks a field goal, and it goes, into the stands. And there is a beer ad that says, "When you're having more than one."
Well, and also the fact that Lou Michaels is kicking, you still have linemen. He's probably I'd say maybe the last lineman who actually kicked before they actually had kickers.
Yeah.
Instead of just some guy who happened. That's the Lou Rosa model.
Bruce Gossett had the build of an offensive lineman. Kind of barrel-chested, 6'3", 235, whatever, and he had a good strong leg. What else happens? Oh, Willie Ellison. Yeah, see, I think of Willie Ellison more of an early 70s player. I forget that he was on the Rams in the 60s.
I think he was one of those players who was injured a lot and maybe he didn't play.
Yeah, he played into the
all
70s,
the time.
but yeah, he got. I think either he lost playing time to somebody else, but.
So 49ers of the Falcons. There wasn't this. They didn't really cover this game that fully. 49ers were favored to win, but they lost pretty badly, 24-12.
Well, they pretty much beat themselves. Brody threw 3 interceptions. Kermit Alexander, who rarely makes a mistake at all, fumbles a punt. And Atlanta rushes for 230 yards.
You had 2 rookies, Jim Mitchell and Bob Berry, had big games. The Falcons had never won on opening day before, and they had never beaten a Coastal Division opponent before.
That's right.
Those were the big hurdles for the Falcons. But
the only wrong thing Atlanta did was a punt snap that sailed out of the end zone. Cheerleader picks up the ball and tosses it to number 58, Jim Snydecki.
I don't have anything else on that game.
And there's even only 4 plays for the next game, which is Pittsburgh and Detroit at Pitt Stadium. They show 4 plays. I counted them.
There weren't that many for the Falcons.
I mean, there was, this shouldn't be Howard Cosell doing halftime highlights. Usually that's what you would get. You get, if you got 4 plays in the game you wanted to watch at halftime highlights, then 4 plays was probably about the average.
I think it was it was like 10-3 or something like that. I think it was not. It was a very low scoring game.
Well, Roy Jefferson had an end around. Shiner to Jefferson. Warren Bankston rushed TD. Bankston is about to he's about to give the ball to the ref, and he turns around, throws it into the stands, and the camera follows the ball going into the scrum of the crowd, and it gets passed around and hangs onto it for a couple more seconds before they finally cut. That's the excitement out of that
They were
game.
probably fined $50, you
Yeah.
know, for throwing that
Throwing
ball
in
into the
fans. They
stands.
probably thought it was worth it. One other thing is the Steelers were at home. They're wearing white. Now I'm wondering if maybe heat was the issue. You know, maybe the coaches just knew we're not going to have them wear black.
I don't know. I have to do research on Steeler uniforms. This is one of at least four teams in '69, NFL teams that were playing at a college stadium. They were not playing at their own stadium. They're playing at a college stadium. This is Pitt Stadium, University of Pittsburgh. The last year before they moved to Three Rivers, they played there from '58 to '69.
So this is Chuck Knoll's first head coach.
First
Victory
game.
also. First game,
Yes.
first victory.
Yeah, they won the first game and then lost 13 in a row. Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. Yeah.
And it's fun. We were commenting this earlier. Is that they show the scoreboard and it says Pitt, so it's like that could be Pittsburgh Steelers or Pitt University
Panthers?
Pittsburgh Panthers. Yeah.
Okay.
Also, the other thing was weird about it was that the Pitt part, their score was on the left-hand side, where traditionally
That's right.
a home team is on the right-hand side. And
Yeah.
we were wondering about that. So
I think it wasn't as clear back then as to putting the home on the right side. I think a lot
I'm
of them
not
may
sure
have done
about
the.
that.
I think some home teams may have just done the opposite because they were first. It would be you're reading from left to right, so
I
that's
I don't
just a
know.
guess.
I as far back as I can remember, the home team's always on the right. So
all right. Well, what's next, Pat?
we have the Chargers at Cincinnati. Once again the Bengals play at Nippert Stadium, which is the University of Cincinnati.
Don't like that name.
It's a little weird. And next year they also moved to their new stadium, Riverfront Stadium. And this is a big game for Greg Cook, who was unfortunately had knee injuries and
so many shoulder.
Okay,
Yeah,
sure.
it was week 2, I think. Well, I don't want to do a spoiler alert, but I think Greg Cook had a great game week 1, and then he got hurt the next year. He got tackled, I think, or he got landed on his throwing shoulder, and that I think that was it.
Yeah.
They could never fix it. He tried to come back. I mean, 1970, he just couldn't do it.
I think wasn't it Bill Walsh, who was his quarterbacks coach, said that he was like he would have been as good as Montana.
Oh, he had the build. He was like a bigger guy than Montana and can do all the Montana things, except that he was more athletic, because he was just stronger and had an unbelievable arm. It's a shame that it didn't pan out for him. They, what was it? Paul Brown says he will be another Otto Graham.
Yeah, so one of those woulda, shoulda, coulda players who just don't know, and if nowadays with the surgery that they have, they can repair anything.
Yeah.
Those days it was pretty.
Pretty barbaric back then.
Yeah.
And they weren't going to fix. And Greg Cook, as an example, it's like right before the half, 50 seconds, he goes 70 yards on a couple of passes, a touchdown pass. They retake the lead. That's just what he did in third quarter. Paul Brown's defense squelches a 4th down pass in the end zone. Then Bob Trumpy makes a 78-yard catch and run for an 11-point lead.
And most people remember Trumpy for his broadcasting days, but of course he was a very excellent tight end.
Good speed for a tall guy.
Yes. The other tight end for the Bengals was Bruce Coslett, who later became head coach of the Jets from 90 to 93.
Pronounced differently.
The Charlie Jones mispronounces it Caslett. So,
Caslett, yeah.
But he was a longtime coach in various capacities and head coach for a few years there. Not very successful. The other thing I noticed is that there's used to have flags on the corners of the end zones, red flags. Now they have the pylons.
The flags wasn't really doing their job right. You had to get some sort of a hit on the pylon, because you can hit the pylon at anywhere. You can't really tell when you hit that skinny little
I don't
wire.
think they really thought about it those days. They really
yeah.
felt like they had to get into the end zone. It wasn't like they're just going to touch the pylon or the flag and that's a touchdown. That wasn't like that way.
I think
in
the
those
pylon
days.
became more accurate. It's like you hit a foot right there, and it's a touchdown, and you know, if it's just a skinny little wire with a flag on it, you don't know where that foot landed.
Well, the other thing that I think about is that, in those days they had a wide receiver pattern called a flag pattern. You would go in and then you would go back out to the flag. Doesn't make sense to have a flag pattern now because there is no flag. There's no flag on the field. You call it a pylon pattern now. So
Cook had a great game. He did make a bonehead play. He fumbled the ball right at his own end zone. The Chargers get a score out of it. That made it close, but I think that's when they got another touchdown to get their 11. It was 11-point lead. It ended up being a 34-20 final.
yeah. And once again, they try to be hip and of the times, and they say that it's the generation gap because you had the 30-year-old
John Hadel, the balding quarterback, not quite 30, and he's the square cop as to Cook, the hip kid with long hair. His hair wasn't that
That's a little
long.
bit forced. That's a little bit forced. Most of these shows don't have any reference to what's going on in the world, really. It's just that they're just talking about football. They don't refer to politics or culture or anything like that. So I think that's probably a good thing because when they try and do it, it just doesn't work. So then they have They have this short feature, which was not a that was a sometime thing, where they would just show something outside of the regular games, and so they just showed a bunch of clips from different training camps, summer training camps, and we couldn't really figure out how some of this stuff might be 3 or 4 years old, because you said the Dallas stuff is...
Yeah, that was the Dallas Cowboy yearbook that we were getting in this 69 program, week 1 of NFL. So
this is recycled footage. It's
recycled footage from the Cowboy yearbook, because that's what they started with. They were doing those weight pulling exercises.
And hopefully you might be able to find a copy that has this feature because it's not in the one that's on YouTube. But they look like, they probably were. Some of these, this just shows you how things have changed. These are like, these training camps are held like at college, or it looks like even like a high school field. There's little kids wandering around.
Might be Mason Park or something. Look, yeah, those kids were on Stingray bicycles, just slowing their bikes down, looking at these pros work out.
There's like a chain link fence and houses next door to where they're, these
some guy's watching while he's watering his lawn.
You get to see Don Shula teaching linemen how to get lower and get leverage on their.
Who was that offensive coach of Wiggum?
Paul Wiggin.
Paul Wiggin
for the 49ers. He was a defensive line coach.
He's a hard ass.
Yes.
You see what he was? He ain't got anybody to block this guy. You might as well just go home.
Well, he said, if you don't want to play, just leave.
Yeah, just leave. If you don't want to play, somebody's got to block this guy.
Wiggin played for the. Was a defensive lineman for the Browns for I think about 10 years, and he was later the head coach of the Chiefs and then at Stanford. But he was defensive line coach for a few years for the 49ers.
By the way, block this guy. It was Dave Wilcox. Who the hell was going to block him?
I don't know.
You saw it was 64.
I don't know if those numbers are accurate.
I would believe that was Dave Wilcox throwing some guy on his pile.
No, well, he was playing offense though.
I don't know, man. I don't know what he was playing offense.
It's very difficult to identify these people. In fact,
it's already his fourth year.
Well, in fact, the footage of the Washington football team, they had their names taped on the front of their helmets, like someone's gonna take their helmet.
Yeah.
So that's a little weird feature that they have. So the next game is the Washington football team playing at the Saints. And this is the first game that Lombardi is coaching the Redskins at Tulane Stadium. Once again, a college stadium.
Lombardi cajoles Sam Huff out of retirement. Early in the first quarter, Kilmer was firing strikes, and his bullets thrust New Orleans to a 10-0 lead despite Washington's stacked defense. Summerall says this while they show a shot of a busty blonde standing in the crowd.
Once again, they're kind of their lame attempt at humor, I think. So, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So,
this was 1969.
Yes.
So just imagine what you were watching on TV. You had All in the Family, and All these other nice things that I don't know. Maybe they just don't find him as funny now these days.
So then, Dolphins at the Raiders. This is a Saturday night game at the Oakland Coliseum. So that's pretty interesting. I try to, research when, the whole history of Saturday night games because, they don't really want the NFL to have any kind of game on Saturday because of college football. But this was the AFL in 1969.
They got their foot in the door a little quicker that night. They said, "Why not? NBC is going to do the game. There's no other football game on right now. College is all over." That game got televised, and it turned out to be a pretty good game.
It's the first game for 33-year-old head coach John Madden.
That's right.
Blanda kicks the winning field goal of 46 yards, and he's 9 years older than Madden.
Happiness is being 9 years older than the coach and winning the game for him, 20-17.
Yeah. That's the other thing we didn't even mention this.
What's that?
AFL had already played one game,
That's right.
one
We didn't
game,
mention that.
and the NFL was
Yeah.
starting, and so they had this staggered thing.
Again, AFL, I think, picked up the ball early, and this is just another reason why they had to do a merger. They did this out of necessity. I think they needed the exposure, and they said, "Why not? Why do we have to go by the NFL rules? We'll start our season a week early." I don't know if CBS ran. I don't think CBS ran any AFL games at the time. Probably not.
No, I think CBS was NFL and
Yeah,
NBC was the AFL, if I remember correctly. So Browns at the Eagles. This is at Franklin Field, which is the University of Pennsylvania.
Newly carpeted Franklin Field.
Right, and there's since they have the Penn relays there, there's the track
Right,
around.
the track. Yeah.
So when they go past the end zone, they end up on the track.
Then the ball really starts bouncing around.
Yeah, and my only note on this game was that Joe Scarpati has a pick six, and his most famous moment in his career is he was the holder for Tom Dempsey's 63-yard field goal in 1971. So, but he has a pick six in this game, but it's not enough to overcome the Browns.
Browns hung on in spite of 5 turnovers. They win by a touchdown. There were 6 Brown rookies played well, like Perry Hooker making key grabs. Rookie Ron Johnson ran for 118 yards. Did a decent Leroy Kelly imitation. Browns had a 27-7 lead.
Yeah.
And I guess Joe Scarpati showed his jittery teammates what happens when you hang on to the ball. So that closed the gap, but I guess the Browns hung on.
Then we have the Oilers at Bills. This is at War Memorial Stadium.
Seems like a lackluster game. Jack Kemp sacked 6 times. He throws 3 picks, 2 by Houston. Houston makes a stupid lateral after 1 pick, throws it out of bounds.
Yeah. I always loved that Ken Houston played for Houston.
Right. I think that was the answer that John Brody made on Sports Challenge.
And of course, Houston was the team that Brody signed his famous contract
Oh, yeah.
for on the napkin.
Signed a little napkin like Don Klosterman.
And then I think he got to keep the money, even though he never paid for them.
Became the first $1 million quarterback.
I get to see a little bit of O.J. Simpson in his.
Didn't go very far.
Yeah, he didn't play, but it was 17-3, kind of a boring game. So not much to say about that game.
Beathard played in the game. Is this the Beathard family again?
Yeah.
Playing for the Oilers. Wow, how many generations? The one that was on the 49ers this last year?
Yeah.
Is that like the great-grandson?
I don't think it's that far.
Oh, Charlie Joyner's in this game.
Okay.
Rookie Charlie Joyner makes a play.
I didn't notice.
This guy played until 1986.
Then we have a little break where Pat and Charlie talk about Alex Webster, and Charlie asks Pat what differences did he make, because he had to inherit Ali Sherman's team or whatever, and he said, what differences did he make? And Pat mentions 2 minor differences that in the offense that
How
Webster
they call
made.
the signals and what was it, the way they line up in the huddle.
Something
Was
like
that it?
that.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was going to make that much difference,
I didn't think so either. Yeah.
well, Pat mentioned that, like, Alex Webster was, spirited guy. He was like, he'd play through injuries and stuff like that. So he thinks that's going to really make the difference more than any
I
kind
think
of,
Summerall said he had to tie his shoes for him once because
his back was so bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, they're kind of playing to the fact that Pat Summerall was a Giant, and they're. So we move into the Bears and the Packers. It was their 101st game that they had played against
Yes.
each other.
The semi-annual bloodletting. Just for point of fact, the temperature for this game, which was September 21st, 54 degrees kickoff.
Okay.
I want to know what the temperature is for Green Bay's first game this year. I want to see what the temperature is. There's no way that a 54-degree game, I think after about 1983, 1984, I don't think you get an opening number that low in September, even in Wisconsin.
No, that seems pretty low. Doug Hart is the hero of this game. He
That's
has
right.
2 interceptions and a pick six.
And makes a vicious tackle on someone. At some point, I think the first thing they show is him just leveling a guy who just gets the ball. He just has it hit. He catches the pass and then wham, there he is. Oh, and just point of fact here, Brian Piccolo makes a catch for 15 yards.
Oh, I didn't notice that. They do make a point of the Bears and Packers being in that's a very tough division and very physical, and so they always have
Black
to
and
show
blue division.
like as if there's no other hard hits in any of the other games, only in the Bears Packers.
Now here's the thing. Bart Starr limps off the field at some point, and the rule was the clock would keep running, and if you can get the injured player off the field quick enough, you get in a replacement. You wouldn't be charged a timeout.
Oh, I don't remember that.
Because the timeout rule came later.
Oh, okay.
I think it came later just because of things like this. It happened in Super Bowl III too, I think, where they carry somebody off the field. 2 guys carry somebody off the field because they didn't want to burn a timeout, and they could just get them off the field and run the next play. I'm not sure, but it's the timeout rule came later.
Next, we have the Cardinals at the Cowboys. Once again, Cotton Bowl, playing in a college stadium.
All right, this is the Cotton Bowl. They got those ridiculous numbers that they're trying to black out on the field. It looks terrible. They got these 2 numbers. One's blacked out, it's the same number, like 20, and then 30. 30 was the NFL, was brought in more, but they I don't know, they couldn't get paint thinner to put out those numbers. So they put this kind of black coating, and it didn't do anything. It just made a black outline, and you can still see the number.
So I didn't even realize they had different numbers painted.
And we didn't even talk about some of these stadiums here have markers every 5 yards. Some of them have
25.
Have G on the goal line. They put a G. So I think there's one game that has a 0. It's amazing. It's like you leave it up to the groundskeeper, and that's what you get.
Before standardization, I mean, in Mile High, they have this checkerboard colored pattern in the end zones.
Right. It's kind of psychedelic almost, too.
Yes.
It's got orange and brown, and then it goes. It's a diamond-shaped thing.
So you had two quarterbacks in this game who had been in the armed forces.
Right. A 2-year stint in the Army. Charlie Jones gets his job back.
Charlie Johnson. And Staubach had been in the Navy, and he was a 27-year-old rookie for this game.
And he was hurt. He got dumped 6 times in this game, and he couldn't dodge. Roger couldn't dodge. Got up slowly a lot.
This was before he knew how to scramble. He was raw. So he had been in the Navy. He hadn't been playing for a few years, so he was probably rusty. His skills had deteriorated.
Still managed to hit Dennis Homan for the injured Bob Hayes, and a 75-yarder to Lance Rensel to ensure victory.
And then rookie Calvin Hill, I think he was rookie of the year, through an option TD pass to Rensel as well. So
all alone when the ball arrived.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Staubach scrambles for another score as he's again handled pretty hard in the end zone, but Cowboys prevailed 24-3.
Yeah. The last game is the Chiefs at the Patriots. And once again, this is at Alumni Stadium, which is Boston College Stadium. And then the next year, the Patriots would play at Harvard Stadium. And then I think in 71 they moved to, well, I don't know what it was called. What was it first called? Sullivan Stadium.
That sounds right.
The
Yeah.
first one, yeah.
Before.
Before it was later renamed. But the Chiefs destroy the Patriots 31-0 in this, and this is where the writing comes in, where it's very flowery, very dramatic.
Okay.
And you can do your whole thing.
You can do it if you want.
No, I don't have it written down.
I have it. Yeah. Okay, so when the Kansas City offense took the field, it exuded a smoothness born of confidence, a rugged born of power. Led by number 16 quarterback Lenny Dawson, they scored in patterns that flowed of liquid grace. Or led by Robert the Tank Holmes, they scored with bruising stubbornness. Then they have the flashing legs of number 1 Nolan Smith, who returns a punt with all the dazzle available from his 154 pounds of quicksilver on this 65-yard return.
So that's what this is. That's what makes these shows so unique. Is this really, dramatic writing? This is about as over the top they get, but it's just fun to hear the way that they describe these. I mean, I don't know when it started, but I just really love the Chiefs' famous huddle.
Yeah.
Where they have the quarterback is facing the line, and
it looks cool.
And they're not in a circle. They have two lines of the players,
Yeah.
and they're all very tall. They're taller than Dawson, so nobody can see past them. And he tells them, in their two rows what the play is, and that's kind of I don't know of any other NFL team that had that.
There's no way you could hear or kind of read his lips because he's completely covered up.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes, I think it was it Butkus or somebody else that would just be able to know, like Joe Kapp, he would get in the huddle, you could see him, and you can almost hear him, red right, red, but
Yeah.
okay, we're running to the right here,
And the Pats only had 100 yards of total offense. Their quarterback. Now, this is just a totally weird thing. His name is spelled Taliaferro, but they always pronounce it Tolliver, and I never understood how
I don't
you
understand
get
that
Taliaferro.
I got Taliaferro, yeah.
It's pronounced Tolliver in all the games that he ever played in. He was minor quarterback for the Patriots for a couple of years.
This guy isn't a descendant of Tolliver, Billy Joe Tolliver.
That's how it should be spelled.
The damn Hail Mary thrower in '91.
Yeah, that's a different guy.
No, it's a different guy. Yeah, because Taliaferro.
Yeah.
He ain't getting no Tolliver from me.
I know.
I ain't
so
saying.
yeah,
you get spell it like that, you get it like that.
Of course, Charlie pronounced it Caslet too, so who knows? But no, I mean he's in a lot of games and it's always pronounced that way. So I don't know. It just maybe that's just the way he likes it pronounced. So. And that's the end. And
there's one other thing I just saw last night, and it was the Packers-Bears game. There's a graphic. It's done by back in the day it was ESPN Classic Sports. It was they put the program on. This is where the guy taped it and put it on YouTube, I think. There's a graphic by ESPN Classic. It says. Green Bay, this is 1969. Green Bay finished 2 games ahead of second place Chicago to win the Central Division Championship in 1969. This is 1969. They're saying Packers won the division.
No, they don't know what they're
talking about. The Packers finished 8-6. They were third. The Bears were 1-13.
That's just obviously a mistake.
Yeah, that wouldn't be the first one. The one that they make twice is on Pat Fisher. Both John Facenda and then years later, Harry Callis says the same thing. He became a Redskin in 1975.
Okay, yeah. I mean, these people aren't perfect, and that's the other thing we'll probably be pointing out any kind of mistakes, like, Coslet being pronounced Caslet, so,
Because our audience is going to bitch about, us making mistakes.
That's exactly right.
So we'll spread it around.
I mean, hopefully there'll be enough people to listen who will point out our mistakes. This season marks the 50th anniversary of pro football, and it seems to me that each year crowds get bigger, play gets more exciting, and records continue to fall.
Pat, that's true, and There was a record set last Sunday in Denver, and of course the altitude may have had something to do with it. And that was the 98-yard punt by New York Jets' Steve O'Neill. The previous record was 94 yards. It was set in the dawn of professional football by Wilbur Fat Henry. He played for your old team, Pat, I believe the Canton Bulldogs in 1923.
I played with him, Charlie. I guess that record was on the books for a while. But as this week's results show, you never can tell about anything in this game, and looking at some of the next week's games, like Baltimore at Minnesota, San Francisco at Green Bay, and the Jets at San Diego, I don't see a sure thing in sight.
Last Sunday, almost half the games in professional football were upsets. I would suggest it might be a little early in the season for either you or I to go out on a limb.
Might be, Jones.
I'm Charlie Jones.
I'm Pat Summerall. See you next week.